When you take a look at the fixtures around Europe this weekend, there is one tie that jumps off the page, and that is, of course, Arsenal against Manchester City. Proved to be such a pivotal match over recent seasons. It's first versus third. It's Pep Guardiola against Mikel Arteta. Let's hear from both of them ahead of the game.
Well, he's in contention. Let's see how he progresses from here to Sunday. And obviously, he had to leave the pitch. That's never good news, but let's see how it recovers.
I'm not going to deny how important is Rodri, like is Kevin, like is many players of many years are here, but they are not. We cannot start to crying and complaining. You have to find a solution, and solution will be 11 players going to be there to try to win in London.
Flying the flag for Arsenal, Kieran Gibbs joins us. His opposite number, Nadim Anua, also on the show. Before we hear from the boys, obviously they're talking there, Craig, about people that are missing. No Rodri for Manchester City, no Saka possibly for Arsenal. Who's the bigger miss?
Wow. Well, I think if you watch City play recently, some of the games he's been a huge miss, but they could be so reliant on Saka. They've got players to come in, City, that haven't done great without him being in there. But you just wonder then what they're going to do with Martinelli out. Trossard will go one side. Do you put Havertz up there if he's not fit? Or do you put Nketiah away? And Jesus? So there are some options, but I would say Saka, I don't know, it's a 50-50 call, really.
What do you do as a coach, Stevie, when you've got someone in Saka's position who's played so many matches in a row for such a long time, came off against Bournemouth, came off against Lens? How much do you risk him for this tie?
Well, I guess for me it boils down to you either start him or you don't play him at all, in my opinion. You know, if he's fit enough to play, then I think you start him.
Right.
And then you keep an eye on what's going on. And if you're not sure, then absolutely, I don't think you risk.
There's no argument to say bring him on the last 15 minutes if you need something, need a spark, and give you at least a little bit of extra.
Well, I would suggest anybody with a muscle injury, unless he's going to be running up and down for the 75 minutes, then I would suggest anybody with a muscle injury, bringing him off the bench, having sat on the bench, isn't the best preparation, particularly for a guy that they're so reliant on. So, yeah, I think you either start him or you just bite the bullet and think about the big picture.
Right.
Don't play him at all.
Depends how serious it might get. Look, there's an international break coming up, and quite frankly, why would Mikel Arteta give two hoots about England?
Yeah,
right.
He's got a little bit of recovery time.
Yeah, he's got more recovery time now. If we take the international game out the window,
yeah, he wasn't even called up, so that's not even a factor.
Right. So there's not a problem then. It just comes down to the fact that whether this could be turned into an 8-week injury or 2 or 3 weeks.
The problem is we don't know. If we knew, we could actually probably give you a better answer.
We don't know much, though, do we? It doesn't stop us.
Well, it does. It makes a difference, because if it's, there's been talk about it being a little strain on the back of his hamstring. If that's the case, then absolutely you go nowhere near him. If it's just if somebody's just booted him or kicked him or whatever, then that's a completely different story, Dan.
Kieran, is it as simple as saying that Arsenal can't beat Manchester City without Saka?
I mean, no, it's not. It's not that big. But he for me, he's the franchise player. I think he's a bigger miss than Rodri being out for City. But I would have to leave him out. I'd agree with Stevie. I think if it's a muscle injury, then you just got to leave it. I mean, he's just played a ridiculous amount of games, and I didn't want to jinx it. I said it a couple of weeks ago, but eventually it takes his toll, and he's feeling the load. But they've got good enough replacements. I think Trossard, I would definitely has to start for me in this game. They're going to have to be a little bit cuter because they lack, without Martinelli and Saka, they lack that penetration. I felt like we saw it the other night against Lens. They kind of run out of ideas a little bit more predictable. So I feel that they still have enough there to beat City, especially at the Emirates at the moment. But yeah, I think it's a big blow.
City did a number on Arsenal, of course, last season, Nadim. Is this a better Arsenal team?
Not at this moment in time with people being out and them not having the full balance as such. I think last season, as we saw, especially for that first half of the season, they were nearly perfect. I think it was 50 points at the halfway mark. So I don't think they're at that point just yet, but I think their ceiling is a little bit higher with the people that they've signed and the experience that they had from the last year. But I think for City, they've already lost to Arsenal this year in the Community Shield. Some people said it mattered, some people said it didn't, but Arteta said himself that that was a big win for himself and his players. And so as a consequence, as Kieran was saying, playing at the Emirates, they'll fancy their chances against beating anybody. But I think for me personally, the Saka thing, I think he's going to play. I think Arteta is just like, he's just teasing everybody. But Saka seems like one of those players who overall is very, very robust and he just wants to be a part of the biggest games. And he's the main man for Arsenal, the franchise player, as Kieran said. So I think it should be a fantastic game. And I think Rodri missing for City is potentially bigger, say, if the two of them end up not playing. Because in that, you may be looking at someone like Kovacic, who doesn't know exactly how to play those roles in the biggest games for the clubs. Because, you know, in fairness to him, he's not played those games yet.
They're a better squad, going back to Arsenal.
Yes, yeah.
They're a better squad, but they have not played better this year than last year. And to go back to Nathan's point, last week at Wolves, it was Kovacic and Matheus Nunes who got taken off at half-time, who was getting a lot of stick. Then you've got Calvin Phillips. None of those players can do the job that Rodri can. So there is an argument to say, even though City are a stronger side and a stronger squad at this moment in time, that Rodri could be a bigger absence, because how important the middle of the park is going to be. But I'm the same. I think, you know, I think Arteta risks Bukayo Saka if it's not looking like a crazy, you know, he's only going to last 10 or 15 minutes decision. I think if he thinks he can get an hour out of him, he's probably going to try that.
Who's your City starting 11, Nathan?
I think for me, Bernardo Silva is probably going to come into the midfield alongside of Kovacic, because I think he's, you know, he did very well with Rodri in the past there, Silva and Rodri in that midfield area, and I think they need someone that understands how that's going to work. And then I think Foden did do well in the midweek, but I think he could do a good job on that right-hand side, especially because Zinchenko will be coming inside, so he could probably affect it from that standpoint. And that's the potential team as such, which has got tons of experience from the success of the last year. But I think they can't really rely on too many of the new players at this moment in time, because Arsenal do give City a very, very tough game, especially at the Emirates. So I think some familiar faces going there with a positive feeling from the past, I think that will make a big difference. And as you can see from that, it's only really Kovacic, Kovacic and Guardiola, the only two who really haven't had a taste of success down there.
And you've got Grealish over Doku. It's been interesting to see. Has Grealish been unfit? What's been the deal, Nathan?
Well, he was injured for a period of time, which is, you know, it's very unlike him, because as we were talking about with Saka, like, Grealish overall is very robust in terms of being able to play many games through a long period. I think at the end of last season he played, I think it was either 9 or 10 games in the month of April. So, and they were the biggest games of the season for City, really. So it was strange to see him being out, but, you know, Doku stepped up in fairness to him. But as far as like Guardiola thinks himself, you know, he can rely on players, he can trust those players because he knows that they've done it before. There's a reason why he picks certain teams for certain games, and it tends to be the ones with the most experience who need to be able to manage that sort of environment and play a style of football, which maybe we don't understand from the outside, but he knows is required to win in those places. I think Grealish can definitely do that, because I think his skill set definitely suits those occasions.
It must be a nice luxury for Guardiola to be able to pick players who've been there and done it for these sort of matches.
No, absolutely. Yeah, this is when your squad, this is when it counts the most. I would actually change that team, though, to be honest with you.
Go on.
I would bring Stones back in. I would have Stones and Phillips as your two.
It's all down to his fitness, though, isn't it? That's the problem.
Well, but the three that played last week was so bad. Kovacic, Nunes and Phillips together, it just didn't work at all. So I think you guys completely scrap it. As I said, I would change it. I wouldn't play Grealish either. I'd play Silva on the left of the three with Alvarez, and then have Foden on the left, Haaland up front, and have Stones and Phillips, and defend with the 6 and get after it with the 4.
Why would you not have Grealish?
Well, because he hasn't played that much. I prefer Foden. I think Foden's got a goal in him, as does Silva, as does Alvarez, as does Haaland. No, so you're basically playing 4 guys who've got goals in them. I look at Grealish and I don't see any goals in him. So I would go forward with the 4, and then you got the 6 at the back. If City are solid at the back, they win this game. Absolutely.
Kieran, who would you prefer to be up against? Grealish or Foden?
I mean, I wouldn't like to be up against either of them, to be honed.
Yeah, I thought that might be the answer, Kieran.
When they're both firing. When they're both firing. I feel like Foden's more of a tricky player to mark. Jack uses his body really well. And so, I feel like that can be easier to deal with. A player that's always on the move was always a nightmare for me. So Foden's always on the move, and you just can't you can't take your eye off him for a minute. And so I would have to say Jack. And also I know Jack, so I can give him a few more digs.
But on that left side, it would be Grealish or Doku, wouldn't it?
Yes.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
One a bit more pacey and direct, and Jack Grealish a bit more of a ball carrier, who was better with his end product last year, clearly, but still a bit like when Raheem Sterling first came to the club, had to really up his stats in the final third and better them. And I think that's part of his game. His manager did say he missed a big chunk of pre-season. He had one or two little knocks, as Nathan mentioned, and they had a player to come in and do a job that they signed in Doku, and I think that's why he's been in there. But I think if you said, look, there's a Champions League semi-final tomorrow, it would probably be Jack Grealish, with his experience and what he's done for the manager, that would play.
And what we've just talked about tells you the depth that City's got. We're sitting here talking about who do you play in the middle, who do you play wide, we're not doing that with Arsenal.
Right.
We're talking about he's going to have to put something together with either Jesus on the left or the right, and then Trossard and Nketiah. It's a different ball game with City. Absolutely, you want to have the problems Guardiola's got.
It's interesting. Craig brings it up, Kieran. Like, is Arteta sat there chatting to the players, showing him similar videos?
100%. He would have analysed all of their games so far this season. And he's right, they have come a little bit loose in games. But also so have Arsenal this season. So that's why I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be more of a tactical game, this game, with big players missing. But yeah, Craig's right. The left side is looking a little bit weak at the moment, a little bit inexperienced. But I mean, it's still early stages in the season, so I'm sure Pep will know that as well, right? So I don't think it's such a bad idea to put Kyle Walker left back, actually.
Nadem, how much are these problems a consequence of continually changing the personnel at the back?
I think it can make a difference, but I think in the game, say last week, I think that was one of Nathan Ake's worst games, and overall he's been very, very good for the club. And I think interestingly as well, going back to the 3 ties last season, I think obviously Saka had an incredible season, but he didn't necessarily have the best of games in those matchups against Nathan. And that, might be a surprise to some, but for some reason the matchup was just there. But I think what's key, as you look at those goals and we look at bigger picture, they've still only conceded 5 so far in the league this season. And they do offer opportunity, but I think some of that comes because they're so aggressive with how they want to defend. I think the goal in midweek, Ruben Diaz decided to try and press as high as he could there, but then offering all that space in behind. I think that's in their nature. And it'll be interesting to see if Guardiola thinks that, this is something that they need to change. But for sure, as Kieran's saying, Arteta would have seen it. He's going to try and play into it. But I think Pep will understand that as well. And I don't think he's going to change his principles, but he might just have a little wrinkle to try and deal with that situation.
It was something that has been in their nature for a long time. And it was something particularly in the Champions League knockout stages that they came unstuck, yes, right? Leaving that space in behind. Now, they were still doing it last year. They just did it better. Right. They just defended those situations better more often than not. Yeah, it was a struggle against Inter in the final at times, a bigger struggle than many of us thought, not the greatest performance, but they defended better last year. And as Nathan said, generally they have this year. But when you've got a squad like this, you have to nitpick and look. There's no point Mikel Arteta sitting there with, there's no flaws here. We can't get at them. You've got to find little holes, pick little holes in areas you can get at. It's a fascinating game because I don't think City are playing brilliantly either. Yeah, they're dominating games. They dominated Leipzig in midweek. But again, Haaland was quiet. He was quiet at Wolves last week. But Alvarez has stepped up. That's the difference. Mm-hmm. So if Arsenal have got some issues, the fringe players around are going to have to step up. Can't keep looking at Saka. Can't keep looking at Odegaard. If these guys are kept quiet by Man City, 1 or 2 others on the fringe need to step up big time. That's what Julian Alvarez and others have done at Man City.
All right then, prediction time. Let's take a look at what everyone is going for. Of course, Kieran must be going for an Arsenal win with his former Arsenal ways. Oh no, a draw. Says, Nadem says a draw as well. Craig says a draw.
Yeah, but it's about 4 goals.
Stephen says, I'm the only one who's got any belief in Arsenal, Kieran. Take that. Right, Nathan, why are you going for a draw? You don't mean it.
Because I think, no, I do mean it. I do mean it. The two teams, they're not playing at their absolute best right now, and I think tactically they'll probably cancel each other out. But it's not to say that it won't be a good game, and I think it will be end to end when it needs to be. But ultimately, I think it's going to be two sides that are going to be making sure they don't lose the match. And yeah, I think it finishes as a draw, and 2-2 would just be nice, and it'll be a good game.
Kieran, if you just said draw because you think Manchester City will win, but you can't say that.
No, I just didn't. I was going to put Arsenal win, but then I didn't want you to try and jump on the train.
Don't mind, mate. You're the driver of the train.
I can't believe you've picked Arsenal to win.
I've seen a lot of City. There's some vulnerability there, isn't there? As Craig says, they haven't been at their best, and Arsenal might just nick it. You've gone for City, though, Stevie.
Aye. Well, Martinelli's out. Saka's probably going to be out, and even if he's not 100%. Two of your top three scorers from last season, and they're not playing. So where are the goals coming from? You know, we don't. Jesus tells us he.
Trossard. I mean, he's been.
Yeah, aye. I mean, listen, Trossard and Ketia. I mean, yeah, they're going to be up there, but are you really relying on them scoring? Are you telling me that there's more chance of them scoring than Haaland or Alvarez or Foden? I don't think so. City has way more goal scorers, in my opinion, going forward, and that's why I think they'll win ultimately.
You on draw?
Apparently so. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big moment for Arsenal here, really, early in the season after last year. It's why Declan Rice was signed. Players like that, you know, these to go in and have an influence. If Saka's out, you have to cope with it. I think you can get at City if you're patient, and certainly Wolves were last week to an extent. I think Arsenal have more possession than what Wolves did, but not as much as what City will have. So they have to be patient in there. And I can see them causing City a problem. I can't picture an Arsenal win, but I can certainly picture a pretty good performance. And the last thing they need is to take another battering from the City side, particularly so early in the season.